Good morning, Sunny Hills Church of Christ, and all of our friends visiting on social media. Welcome to this Friday morning devotional. We started a series on the parables, and today I want to do the story of the withered fig tree. Now, I know what you want to ask, Randy. Why are you doing the story of the withered fig tree in a series on parables? Well, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked. Two reasons. One is the story of the fig tree that Jesus cursed has everything to do with God's intention of his people bearing fruit. It's all about fruit or no fruit. And since in these parables, in the last several we've done, they've been about fruit or no fruit. Excuse me, I still have this winter cough. Parable of the sower. No matter how you look at it, is there 4 soils? Is there 6 soils? Maybe it's just 2 different soils. No matter how you look at it, it boils down to fruit or no fruit. Not like a little or a lot. That's all good soil. Fruit or no fruit. We did the parable of the weeds, or the wheat and the weeds, or I like to call it the second parable of the sower. We did that, and we saw that God wants to sow his people, the sons of the kingdom, into the world like seed, so that they will bring forth fruit. And the ones that don't bring any fruit, the weeds, the darnel, that's not good. They're going to be carried away and burned, it says later. So, fruit or no fruit. Last week we looked at the parable of the mustard seed and the leaven that are fit within the parable of the weeds, between the parable and its explanation. And so they appear to be related to it. They help it say fruit or no fruit. Either you're like a little tiny mustard seed that dies to itself and then becomes something great through the power of God to bless all who are in the garden. Or you're like yeast and you just puff everything up. Don't be like yeast. Fruit or no fruit. This is what it's about. So that's one reason that I want to deal with this story of the cursed fig tree in this series on parables. Now, what's the other reason? Well, I'm glad you asked what the other reason is. It's because when I told you a week or two ago, when I defined parable, you might remember, parabole, it literally means to cast alongside. Balo is to cast, and para is like in relation to, next to, along with. It's just parable, to cast this alongside of that. Because this, whatever I'm casting here, is something you can understand that's in this sort of physical reality that will give you some spiritual insight and the meaning of this spiritual reality. And so it's usually a story that's told so that when you understand it, you see the spiritual meaning behind it. The meaning is not in the story, it's in what the story is pointing to. And so this story of the fig tree, if we understand it, even though it's not told as a parable in a story form, everything that happens from Jesus being hungry, seeing a fig tree full of leaves, going to it to find figs, finding it empty, when it should have been full, and then cursing it, and it dying withers away at the roots. That whole scene sets, especially in Mark 11, it sets as a parable, an indictment against the temple and its leadership. The people of Israel, God's people, were starving. They were starving for God. They were hungry. And they would come sometimes 3 times a year. Some could only come once a year at the main Passover and Feast of Bread. But They would come to Jerusalem. They'd come to the temple to find a connection with God. They were starving for this connection with God. And they would get there, and it would have all the, pomp and circumstance, I guess people say. It would be glorious, beautiful, 60 feet high, I think the temple is. I mean, I was there. I was told the number, but I can't remember. But it's just amazing. It's overwhelming how amazing all these structures are there. And it's beautiful, and it's very, at that time, it was very ornamented, so much gold and jewels and everything. And then there's all the religious people, the leaders, the priests, the sacrifices are going on. There's the prayers and the giving, and it's all very religious. It's a fig tree full of leaves. And here all the people are coming starving for God. And when they get there, it's just an illusion. It's a mirage. There's no substance. God is not there. He is not there in that temple. He is not there in those procedures. He is not there in the dealings of the religious establishment with the people. He's not there. It's completely empty. There is no fruit. There's no figs. There's no refreshment. And so Jesus' cursing of the fig tree is a judgment on the temple. And this just comes before Jesus does all those woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, and he calls them brood of vipers. He says they're whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones, and they tie up heavy burdens that they're not even willing to bear, and they don't know anything about justice and mercy and faithfulness. It's just a tree full of leaves and no fruit. And so they're condemned. And it's not long, 30, 35, 40 years at the time of Jesus, the whole thing's just razed. Titus comes in with Rome and just destroys everything. And at one point, Jesus said, "Behold, your temple is left to you desolate." And so this whole story of Jesus in Mark, he actually comes and he goes into the temple and he has some dealings with them. He comes out and he curses this fig tree, and he goes in and has dealings with them again. He comes out and it's withered at its roots. And the disciples are like, "Whoa, what happened?" And it's very clear that the way he intertwines them, Mark is trying to say this and that, they're parallel. So what you see happening here, that's what's going to happen there. Now, I want to clear up a little bit of confusion about this story because, and here's the part we read in Mark 11, verse 12. It says, "The next day as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, 'May no one ever eat fruit from you again.' And his disciples heard it. Then they go in Jerusalem, and he does his thing with them. And, it's written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer. You've made a den of thieves.' And so when they leave, then in the morning, the disciples notice that the fig tree had withered from its roots. So the part I want to talk about is, sometimes people don't understand. They think Jesus is being unfair, and why is he cursing this fig tree when it's not the season of figs? So they're thinking, why would you expect figs on there if there's not supposed to be? And so all it takes is to understand a little bit about the context, the setting where Jesus is, and that with these fig trees, the figs come with the leaves. So the figs grow with the leaves, and so by the time a tree is full of leaves, those figs are ready to eat. And when it is the season for the figs, that's when you find them in the marketplace. If you go to the marketplace and find all these figs for sale, that's the time of figs. That's the time of figs. You find them in the marketplace, you can buy them and take them home. But if it's not yet that time, if it's almost that time, but not yet that time, if it's not the season or time of figs, then a fig tree full of leaves should also be filled with figs. And so here's the imagery. It's crying out from a long ways away, "I'm full of figs. I'm, I have all this refreshment for you. Come and get it. And when Jesus comes, it's empty. And that is the experience of the people of God coming to the temple of God and finding no refreshment, finding used car salesmen. No offense to used car salesmen, just the stereotypical, you're going to get ripped off here kind of thing. And so what's the message to the church here? The message is God wants to see his people in the world living in such a way that people, when they experience us, they taste God in some way. Not perfectly, maybe 30, maybe 60, maybe 100. But in some way, there's a refreshment. We're refreshing. They can tell we're different. And they find fruit. Fruit or no fruit. God's looking for fruit in your life, in my life. And so I pray for your fruitfulness this week. Let yourself be a temple of God and let people experience his Spirit in your life. And God bless you and have a great weekend. All right, bye-bye.